Good morning, Dulcimer Crossing. Hi, friends. Welcome to another Wednesday morning live stream. My name is Erin May, and I am one of the teachers on Dulcimer Crossing and also help with some of the live events. And the last few weeks, I've been doing the Wednesday morning live streams while Steve recovers from knee surgery. And I actually got to talk with him yesterday, and he's doing really well in his recovery. He's been playing his dulcimer quite a bit, and so that's all good news. Physical therapy is going well, so he's hoping to be able to be back with you for the Wednesday morning live streams starting next week, but I'm on deck just in case, and I love that. So I am happy to be able to hang out with you and play dulcimer together. That's my favorite thing to do, you know. So I'm going to just double check that the stream is actually working. Last week I forgot to unmute at the beginning. So, you know, gotta just make sure things are going right. Okay, perfect. I see it, and I should be able to see your comments on Facebook if you want to ask questions or add something. I love that. Cool. So our topic for today is seventh chord and sus chords, which is short for suspended chords. There's a lot of stuff out there about how to make major and minor chords on both kinds of dulcimers. And then I teach and have noticed that a lot of students have been taught, well, you can just ignore the seventh and the sus and the whatever comes after it, which is true when you're a beginner. And then one day you might decide, like, but I'd really like to know what a seventh chord is. I'd really like to know what that SUS after the chord name actually means. So I thought we'd do a little bit of music theory and a little bit of where to find it, work on seventh chords and sus chords. So are you ready? Let's dive in. Okay, music theory first. Major chords and minor chords have three notes. They are the root. So I'm going to build a D chord here. The root is the name of the chord. D or G or A. It looks like the feed is frozen. So I'm going to... Okay, now it seems to be working again. I don't know what happened. All right. So we'll start with a D. We'll build a D chord. And so D is the root. And then it's got a third. And the third determines whether the chord is major or minor. So this is going to be a D major chord because I have an F sharp next. And then it has the fifth. And so in the D chord, that's an A note. It's also the note on the middle string on a mountain dulcimer. So if you're on a hammer dulcimer, you play your marked bridge, and then you skip a string and you play the F sharp, which is the third. And then you can either skip a string and keep going up, and that's your fifth, or you can cross over in your box to the other side of the marked bridge where you started, and that's your fifth. And so it's pretty easy to visualize it on both of our instruments. We can play a D chord, a D major chord, pretty easy on any kind of dulcimer. That's great. So then how about the seventh? So there are two variations of the seventh that can be added to a major chord. So the one we usually call a D7 is actually a flatted 7 from our major scale. So on a mountain dulcimer, that looks like going open is the root, second fret is the third, fourth fret is the fifth, sixth fret is the seventh. And you think the sixth fret is the seventh, but usually when I play in the key of D, I use the 6.5 fret when I'm tuned to DAD. So the 6.5 fret is called the major seventh. And the sixth fret is just called a D7. So on a hammer dulcimer, if you go straight up on one side of the bridge instead of crossing over into the box. So you play your D on a marked bridge, and you skip a string and you play the F sharp, and you skip a string and you play the A, and then you skip a string and you keep going up. Your next note is a C natural. And then if you play in the box, you have the C sharp note, right? So that is the two different kinds of sevenths you can add. So the 6.5, or the staying in the box shape on the hammer dulcimer, that is called the major seventh. And so this would be called a D major 7 chord. And then the lowered seventh, or the flatted seventh, or the note we get in a mixolydian scale at 6 on the mountain dulcimer, or going straight up one side of the bridge on the hammer dulcimer, that's the one we call D7. Its fancy music theory name is dominant 7. So if you're looking at a music theory lesson, they might call this the dominant 7. But if you're looking at a chord chart, they would just call this D7. Okay? So the theory to find the seventh that you want to add to a major chord, we'll start with major, right, is to keep counting the notes up until you get to the seventh note of the scale. But there's actually this like easier way on the mountain dulcimer to find that note, which is to find the root and then look down either one whole step or one half step. So I can't look down from 0. So I'm going to find my root, the D note, at the 7th fret on the bass string instead. And from here, if I look down a half step or a small space, then that note is the major 7th. And if I look down a whole step, that note is the minor 7th, or the dominant 7th, or the D7 kind of note. Okay? So the first easy way to figure out major 7 and dominant 7 chords on the mountain dulcimer is to start with bar chords. Again, with the hammer dulcimer, it's sort of, do you skip the strings going straight up, or do you skip the strings going in the box? So that's how you find it easily on those instruments. So a D bar chord can't go down on the melody string. So we're not going to start with that one. We're going to start with E. So if I fret 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 is an E bar chord, right? So if I take my E bar chord and I go down by 1 fret, the question is, was that a big space or a small space that I went down? And the answer is, it's a big space. There's a big space here. So this is an E7 chord. Yay, E7. And then if I make an F sharp bar chord at 2, 2, 2, and I look down 1 fret on the melody string, is it a big space or a small space? The distance here, the 2nd fret space here, that's a big space. So this is an F sharp 7. F sharp 7. If you make a G bar chord at 3, 3, 3, and then you look down 1 fret on the melody string, is the distance a big space or a small space? 3 is a small space. The answer is that it's a small space. This is a G major 7. G major 7, not G7. So if you don't have a 1.5 fret on your dulcimer, like this one, you don't have a G7 chord on your dulcimer. You only have G major 7. Right? So the thing that happens when we look at diatonic instruments is we tend to have some of the chords, but not all of the chords, right? So if you have a piece of music that calls for a G7 chord and you do not have a 1.5 fret, then you are still just going to play a G chord. So that advice about just playing the major chord or the minor chord and not worry about the extra added stuff, good advice when it comes to a G7 chord. You don't have that note. But if you see an F sharp 7 in the music, you can go, oh, look, I do have an F sharp 7, right? I can play 2, 2, 1. And this same kind of process applies on the hammer dulcimer. You know, you've got got your probably, it depends on the size of the hammer dulcimer, right? On if you have a fully chromatic instrument or not. But there's some places where it's going to be really easy to see that you have a dominant 7 chord or a major 7 chord, and some places where it's not so easy to see that. So you got them sometimes. All right. So the next one is A. That's a 4/4/4 bar. And that 4/4/4 bar, if I look down 1 fret, is it a major 7 or an A7? And the answer is the 4 is a big space, right? And so that is an A7 chord. It's not an A major 7, it is an A7. All right. How about B? If we build our B bar chord at 5/5/5, we look down the fretboard 1 fret on the melody string. That is a B7. It's a 7, not a major 7, because the space of the 5th fret is a big space. How about C? If we play 6/6/6, that's our C bar chord. If we look down 1 fret, this is a C major 7. And that is because the space of the 6th fret is a small space. So that's a C7 chord. If I move up to 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, I have a C sharp bar chord, I have both choices. I can play a C sharp major 7 by playing 6.5, 6.5, 6, C sharp major 7. I can go down another fret though to 6.5, 6.5, 5, and now I have a C sharp 7 because 2 little spaces equals 1 big space. So that's a C sharp 7. The same thing happens with the D chord, and we kind of looked at this when we were building the chord. If I play 7/7/7 and I look down 1 space to 7/7 6.5, that's a D major 7. D major 7. But if I play 7/7/6, that's a D7 chord. Okay. So I'm going to just name them one more time. I have E7, F sharp 7, G major 7, A7, B7, C major 7, C sharp 7, D7, D major 7, and then it repeats again. Now I'm back to E7. Okay, so there is a 7th chord for every shape on the dulcimer. Every chord shape. And so all of our patterns have a way of adding a 7th to them. And I have a little handout that shows them. So the ones that we just played are this shape in the first line. And then the next 3 lines have more shapes. So if you want to learn more 7th chords, I would be happy to send you this PDF file. So you can just drop your email address in the comments or send a message in the Dulcimer Crossing Facebook group, or email me, Erin at erinmaymusic.com. We can get this to you in a variety of different ways. But there's one more thing I want to point out, which is some of these are not major 7 or 7, but they're minor 7. So you see this E little m7, F sharp little m7. What are the minor 7 chords? All right, so there's one more thing for us to learn. I got to remember it. There we go. So if you start with a minor chord like F sharp minor, you can also add the 7th to F sharp minor. So I'm actually going to change my mind and start on A minor. So if I play 4/4/6, an A minor chord, A, C, and E notes are what I'm playing. A, A is here, C is here, E is here. I could play them all on the bass string, 2, 4, 6, 8, A, C, and E. I would use the same kind of seventh as we used for the A7 chord earlier. So it's a G natural note. But if I pair that G natural note with a minor chord, then it sounds like A minor 7, not like A7. So because of the 6 and 6.5 on the standard dulcimer, you can play the A minor 7 and the A7 kind of right next to each other to hear the difference. So I'm using a different shape than I've specifically showed you so far because I want you to hear how it sounds. If I play A7 or I play A minor 7. So that the seventh, that note that we're adding to the chord, is the same if we're making it an A7 or if we're making it an A minor 7 chord. So the difference is what's the triad underneath of it. Now, it is possible to have a minor chord, A minor, with a major 7th, but it's almost never gonna happen in folk music. It's not a common enough chord for us to try to learn where to find a minor chord with a major 7th added to it. So there's really 3 forms of 7th chords that we use regularly. The one we call A7 or D7 or G7 has a major chord with a minor 7 or flatted 7 stacked on top of it. We have a major 7 chord, which has a major chord with a major 7 stacked on top of it. And we have a minor 7, which has a minor chord with a minor 7 or flatted 7 stacked on top of it. So those are the 7th chords, and that's what I've got on the 7th chord voicings handout page. So I also wanted to talk to you about sus chords. That's what we tend to call them in shorthand. That's short for suspended. It's a suspended chord. So suspended chords are actually still 3-note chords. The 7th chords take the 3-note chord and add another chord. So now it's a 4-note chord. And on an instrument like the mountain dulcimer, we are only ever playing 3 of the notes at the same time, unless you have a 4 equidistant strung dulcimer. So we're leaving one out. But with the suspended chords, it's just a 3-note chord. So what happens in a suspended chord is that the third of the chord, which is the note that makes it distinctly major or minor, is suspended to be either a second or a fourth of the scale. So if I go back to my D chord, I think about D as my root, and then I play F sharp is the third, and A is the fifth. So I have a D, F sharp, and A, or I can play D, F sharp, and A on the middle string. And again, on the hammer dulcimer, you're finding your D marked bridge, you're skipping a note, and you're skipping a note. And that's how you're gonna find your root, third, and fifth. So if I want to make this a suspended chord, I don't want the third in there. The third is going to be replaced with either the fourth of the scale or the second of the scale. And both of those create this sound that just leaves you a little bit hanging. You're not 100% sure if it's going to be a major chord or a minor chord. Is it all the way a D chord, or is it kind of holding on to something else? And a lot of times these chords happen when you're going in or out of a chord change. So I'm playing a D chord, I'm going toward a G chord. So I might play this like suspension and then finish the chord. Or I might be on an A chord and I'm going toward a D chord. So I'm going to play a suspension on the way to the D chord. And in a lot of contemporary Christian music and kind of like piano praise band styles, the suspended chords show up a lot. In bluegrass, they show up a lot as this kind of passing sound. So you'll just hear the suspension kind of come and go, and it's creating a little bit of tension, just a teeny tiny bit of tension. It's not dissonant. Like some chords just have a lot of tension in them. They're very dissonant sounding. Suspended chords aren't going to have that kind of feel, but they're going to tug at you just a teeny tiny bit. So to play suspended chords, it's just important to know where the root and the third and the fifth are in your chord. And really, it's important to know where the third is. So if I take L-shaped chords on the mountain dulcimer, or if you think on the hammer dulcimer of your root inversion, you're starting on the marked bridge. If I want to make this a sus2, I'm suspending thus by playing the second note of the scale instead of the third note of the scale. Instead of skipping a fret or skipping a string to get to the third from the root, I'm going to play the very next note in the scale. So a 0, 0, 1 on the mountain dulcimer, a D, E, A on the hammer dulcimer instead of a D, F sharp A. If I want to then make it a regular D chord, I go up a fret or up a string, and now I have my D major chord. I can also suspend the chord by putting the fourth in place of the third. And so now I'm playing 0, 0, 3 instead of 0, 0, 2. Or I would be playing a D, G, A instead of D, F sharp A. So any major chord that I have, I can make it into a suspension. And I say major chord. It's not strictly limited to that, but generally suspended chords resolve. And if I need my suspended chord to resolve, then I need to have the major chord available to resolve too. And so generally I use these on the standard mountain dulcimer in places where I do have the major chord available to me. So I'm looking at a G major chord now. I've got a G note on the bass at the third fret. I've got the fifth on the middle string at the third fret. That's a D note. And then my third of the chord is the B note. And that's at the fifth fret on the melody string. So I'm playing G, B, and D. So if I want to make this a sus2 chord, I lower the third by one note. So now I'm playing G, A, D. A is the second note of a G scale instead of the third note of the G scale, right? And if I want a sus4 chord, I'm going to go up a fret to the sixth fret to a C natural note. And that C natural note is the fourth note of a G scale. So I'm replacing the third with the fourth. I have 3, 3, 6 here. And you can do that for every major chord shape. So again, I do have those chords written out. They look like this. So I have D sus chords in 3 different positions, and I have G sus chords in 3 different positions, and I have A sus chords in 3 different positions. This information could be extrapolated out to the C chords as well, especially if you have a 1.5 fret. So any place that you can play a major chord, you can make the suspension happen by replacing the third with the second or the fourth. Sometimes, if you see these chords in the wild in a piece of music, it will just say D sus, and it won't be specific about whether it is a sus2 or a sus4. And generally, that's a situation where you just want to use your ear to see if one direction or the other sounds more right to you. It's not being dictated specifically in the music. So These are written as the chord that you're playing, and then SUS, again, that's short for suspended. And then sometimes following that, there will be a number, either a 2 or a 4. And sometimes the number isn't there. You decide which way to suspend the chord. So hopefully that information helps you a little bit if you see seventh chords or suspended chords show up in a chord chart on a piece of your music. You can still definitely play regular major or regular minor chords in those places. So suspended chords will always be major. Um, at least in my experience, that's where I've always seen them, around major chords. And the seventh chords are major unless it has a specific notation that it's a minor seventh chord. Otherwise, using your regular major chord is a good substitution for that. But if you want to start adding a little more color to your chord palette, seventh chords and suspended chords are a really nice way to just paint with all the colors of the rainbow, not just the primary colors, right? I love that. Before I go, I want to tell you about a couple of upcoming things for Dulcimer Crossing specifically. So tomorrow night, that will be Thursday, August 11th, we have a live event with Grant Olson as our teacher. Grant was the 2019 National Mountain Dulcimer Champion. He is an expert at four equidistant playing, and he has a really interesting tuning approach that he uses. So he's going to break down the tuning that he loves for four equidistant string dulcimer setups and show us some of the strategies he has for playing out of that tuning, some of the shapes and positions he uses. You can definitely join in that class if you are a 3-string mountain dulcimer player, not a 4-string player. I promise you'll learn something from Grant and his approach. And we always also try to provide some hammer dulcimer translation when we have a mountain dulcimer specific class and vice versa. So even if you're primarily a hammer dulcimer player, you can get something out of these workshops. So if you want to check out that workshop with Grant, you can go to dulcimercrossing.com or dulcimercrossing.simplero.com. And if you just scroll down on the home page, you'll see upcoming workshops. Grant's is the one on Thursday. If you are already a subscribing member at the workshop level, you have access to this already. And if you want to just check out this one workshop, you can click on sign up for Grant's workshop, and it will take you to a page where you can choose just to participate in that workshop. And then we're excited to have Pam Bowman teaching hammer dulcimer in September, and Christian Hewitt coming to us from France to teach mountain dulcimer in October. So more information will be coming soon about those workshops. And I also just wanted to make sure that everyone knows the Dulcimer Crossings subscription is primarily about having access to lessons that you can do at your own pace. So, but in a little more structured environment. So some of us find that like going to YouTube and watching instructional videos can be really helpful, but only to a certain extent. And then we get kind of stuck about where to go next or how this technique applies to this concept. And we get a bunch of ideas and not a cohesive way of moving forward. And so what Dulcimer Crossing tries to do is cultivate some pre-recorded lessons from a variety of different teachers for mountain dulcimer and hammer dulcimer, and put them into kind of a structured lesson plan so that you have step 1, step 2, step 3. When you finish this lesson, here are some other lessons that might be really helpful for next steps for you. And so I definitely want to just encourage you to check out the Dulcimer Crossing website, especially if you're someone who feels like you're kind of an independent learner, you like to do it at your own pace in your own house and on your own, but you need a little more guidance than just kind of hunting and pecking at lessons. And so it's a really great resource, and I encourage you to spend some time digging around. There are some individual courses that you can buy as a one-off as well, but the subscription to this site gives you access to everything, and there's just tons and tons and tons of really great instructional information on there. So that's my spiel. I hope you all have a really great week. It's been super fun to spend this Wednesday morning with you hanging out on Dulcimer Crossing. I hope you enjoy adding some more color to your chords, and maybe I'll see you tomorrow at Grant Olson's live workshop. Take care, y'all. Bye.